So I've got sports reporter Sam Morton with me here, and we're going to be speaking a bit more about Gareth Southgate's squad for the England games, as well as their upcoming fixture against Ukraine. So obviously, Sam, the main person we're looking at is Lewis Dunk, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it's great to see him back in the England squad. It's a long time coming. Obviously, it was a shame that he obviously picked up the injury last time he was picked in the team. But now finally he should really get a good chance to impress, and as I say, a long time coming, because he's been incredible for Brighton for so many years now, and it's been crazy that he's been overlooked so many times by Gareth Southgate. So it's great that he's finally got that recognition, and I really hope that he takes the chance to impress and he gets the opportunity to do so. And I think he will, obviously, with John Stones' injury. You would like to think that he would start with Harry Maguire not being a starter for Man United at the moment. You would hope that he wouldn't go straight into the starting 11 for England, and Lewis Dunk would be one of the first names on the team sheet.
Yeah, well, that was one thing I was going to ask you. Do we think he's going to start? And I think it was Jamie Carragher towards the end of last season said he doesn't see a better English out-and-out centre-back in the league than Lewis Dunk. And we were talking about it a bit before. Tyrone Mings isn't in the squad. I think Stones isn't in the squad. It's kind of Tomori, Maguire, maybe Walker, and then Lewis Dunk. And you're thinking, out of those lot, probably Dunk is the best out-and-out centre-back there.
100%, yeah. No, he plays every week for Brighton, unless he's injured, really, and he's got that kind of experience of playing in a team that likes to play with the ball, dominates the ball, and takes the game to the opposition. So I think he's kind of perfect for the games against Ukraine and Scotland. Really, he can really slot in well into that role, and if Gareth Southgate wants his players to be comfortable on the ball, I think he's the perfect option, in all honesty. And he's got that kind of experience of playing under De Zerbi, and can kind of maybe bring a bit of that into the England squad as well. So I think it's only positives all round, and I think he has to start both of those games, I think.
Yeah, well, I agree. I think if I was Gareth Southgate, I'd be starting Dunk in both those games. But I wonder if Southgate will be quite apprehensive, considering that Dunk hasn't played that much for England, hasn't played with those players, might not be completely comfortable, although I think he's the right player. But I mean, talking about Gareth Southgate, his squad selection raised a few eyebrows across the country. What were your thoughts on some of the players he selected there? Yeah,
a few strange ones. I think Southgate admitted himself that he had to go with kind of players that were fit, I guess. But it is strange when you have players like Maguire, Calvin Phillips, when they just don't get a look in for their clubs.
Yeah.
And it's strange to see them go straight into the national team squad, and I think we've obviously seen that Southgate does have his favourites, and he does like to pick the same players going into tournaments. He almost treats it like a club himself, really, where he knows who his favourite lineup is. He likes to stick to that. So it does leave players like Solly March in the lurch a little bit. I think it's difficult for players like that to even get a look in, because he kind of has his tried and tested players that he does like to stick with. But it is strange. I think obviously with Harry Maguire, he's even further down the pecking order at Man United now than he was before. Same with Calvin Phillips, doesn't really get a look in at City, but yet still picked for England. So obviously you wish them the best. You hope they do well for the team. But yeah, just disappointed for some players that are missing out as a result, really.
Yeah, I guess it's quite frustrating, because I guess the centre-back position is one where obviously, and the holding midfielder position where England haven't necessarily got an abundance of talent there, where if you're looking, for example, wingers, there's players like James Ward-Prowse who could play wide, Jared Bowen, Solly March, for example, and it's a bit harder in those positions because there's more depth with Bukayo Saka, for example, Foden, Grealish, and players like that. But if you were a young player trying to play for England and you saw Southgate maybe snubbing those options to bring in players like Calvin Phillips and Maguire, who I don't think have started a game this season, how would you feel if you were a player trying to get?
It's a bit demoralising. Yeah, a bit demoralising, isn't it? It kind of makes you think, what do you have to do? What extremes do you have to go to get into the England squad, really? But yeah, I think, as you mentioned, he probably is lacking in options in those positions, maybe, and you can maybe see that as a reason why. But you mentioned James Ward-Prowse. I think he is very unfortunate not to get in the team. I know he's not exactly the same kind of position as Phillips, but I would quite like to have seen him get an option, set-piece specialist, and kind of perfect for that. Those kind of last-minute, maybe free kicks if he had one. So I've always thought that, and I think Jared Bowen's obviously very unlucky as well not to get in the squad with the form that he's in. He had 2 goals in goal of the month, didn't he? This in the month just gone. He's in great form. So yes, it's a shame that he's not there. But yeah, as you say, it's difficult for players to get in when Southgate obviously does have the players he trusts and he goes back to when it comes to picking his teams.
Yeah, I guess it's difficult because, you want to have the same players, you want that cohesion, and you kind of want to treat it like a club, because if you're always moving it around, then it's not going to really work. But at the same time, Rio Ferdinand said this earlier in the week, Maguire and Phillips, they've just warmed up this season. That's pretty much all they've done, is run up and down the touchline, warming up, and they've got into the England squad. And you've got players like Bowen, scored 3 goals already this season in 4 games. Ward-Prowse, I think he's got 3 assists and a goal. And it's not great. And just quickly, what would you give your score prediction for the Ukraine game?
Ukraine game, I'll say 4-1 to England. I think 4-1. Yeah, I think it might concede 1. But I think they'll grab a few goals.
Perfect. So thank you for tuning into part 1 of Latest TV News. Make sure you tune in later, as we will be discussing Brighton's emphatic 3-1 victory over Newcastle United. Welcome back to Latest TV News. I've got Sam Morton with me here, and we're going to be talking a bit more about Brighton's emphatic 3-1 victory over Newcastle United. And Sam, obviously Newcastle in the Champions League, almost seen as a rival to Brighton in terms of their recent success, and Brighton came out 3-1 victors. Yeah,
as you say, an emphatic victory. Just the better team all the game, really. Just completely were back to their best. I think obviously they had a difficult game against West Ham where they were hit on the counter-attack, but they really did learn from those kind of mistakes. I think apart from a couple of dodgy moments at the beginning of the game when Newcastle could have scored, I think through Isak had a couple of good chances. But from then on, Brighton really took control and were clinical, and we really saw that with Evan Ferguson grabbing his first career hat-trick. The youngest player since Michael Owen to do that in the Premier League. So it's incredible, and just kind of capped off an amazing week for Brighton, really, with the Europa League draw, signing Ansu Fati from Barcelona, and then beating Newcastle 3-1, and your teenage star scoring a hat-trick. So it was the perfect week for Brighton, really, and it's been a great start to the season all round, obviously, apart from the West Ham blip as such, but I think they've bounced back well from that.
Yeah, I was going to say, with West Ham, obviously a team that didn't really want the ball, wanted Brighton to play and frustrated them. Newcastle wanted to do that from the start. We were both at the game. We could see that from the start. It felt like Fabian Schär, Dan Burn, Nick Pope, they wanted to frustrate the Brighton players. They wanted to waste a little bit of time, take their time with throw-ins, corners, with goal kicks and stuff. And then obviously Brighton scored that goal, and it kind of shook up that plan. But it must be quite a relief for Brighton fans to see that Roberto De Zerbi's almost learned how to make the most of playing against a team who wants to frustrate you and wants to leave you with the ball.
Well, absolutely. I think Newcastle obviously came into the game a bit out of form. Obviously they had a really tough start to the season. It was a great win against Villa, and then obviously defeats against Man City and the pretty terrible defeat against Liverpool in the circumstances that happened. So they didn't come into the game in the best of form, and Brighton probably knew that. They were wanting to bounce back as well. But I think Brighton really, as they showed last season when they had the bad defeat against Everton, they bounced back brilliantly against Arsenal. They've just got a habit of doing that, just really trying to prove to everyone again how good they can be. And the previous game wasn't themselves, really. It wasn't them as they should be. And once again, they were back at it completely. Every player on the pitch really had a great game. And it was great to see. And Newcastle, they struggled to deal with it. Struggled to deal with Ferguson. And again, they gave him far too much time and space. I think the first goal obviously was a terrible goal for Newcastle to concede. But Ferguson just in the right place at the right time to get on the end of the rebound, obviously after Pope fumbled it. Second goal gave him too much space and time outside the box to pick his spot. And it was obviously an amazing finish. Third one, Fabian Schär didn't do the best of jobs really, trying to block that shot, and obviously it's kind of a half-hearted little step in front of him, and it just ricocheted off him and deceived Pope in the net. So I think Brighton really did take advantage of the frailties in Newcastle's team, I think, and just highlighted their credentials again.
Yeah, and I thought it was really interesting because I was reading the programme before the game, and De Zerbi said he was actually impressed with Brighton's performance against West Ham. And I almost agree with him. I think they played almost quite similarly. They just didn't take their chances against West Ham, and obviously Areola had a fantastic game.
Yeah.
But we were saying Brighton kind of had 3 chances. Nick Pope didn't do a whole lot other than pick the ball out of the net, really. And I think that's such a refreshing thing for Brighton fans to see. They're taking their chances, they're hitting their XG, and something that they haven't been doing in seasons gone by.
Well, absolutely, yeah. I think in seasons gone by, Brighton have been known as the team that are just winning the XG every game, but struggling to score. I think obviously in Graham Potter's era, there were games when they would have 20, 25 shots and would only get a goal, or not even that sometimes, and they would often really pay the price for that in the last couple of minutes of the game, and their points tally wouldn't quite reflect how positive the performances were. So with that being considered, I think De Zerbi's done an amazing job, really. I mean, obviously it helps that you've got someone like Evan Ferguson up top that is clinical as they come, which is incredible for an 18-year-old, and scary, really, about how good he can be. But yeah, just having that kind of focal point, and he doesn't even start every game. If he's not 100% fit, you've got João Pedro. It's obviously he hasn't had the best of starts, you wouldn't say. Hasn't been as clinical. I think he's missed a few chances, but he can only get better, I think, as well. And obviously you've got Danny Welbeck as well, who's, as we all know, extremely clinical, really experienced. So a really nice kind of blend of talent there, and Brighton have really got that kind of sorted in that sense. And obviously now we've got Ansu Fati to come into the mix as well, which is extremely exciting, and really looking forward to seeing how he gets on.
And obviously going back to Evan Ferguson, his first career hat-trick, extremely young player, 18 years old. How do you think he'll be at the club in a year's time? It's
difficult to see how he would. I think, as we've seen with Brighton, I think if a player is performing at the level of Ferguson, we do see that they do move on because the big clubs come calling, and it's very difficult to say no. But what we have seen with Albion is they do not accept anything less than the price they want for them, really. They've set a demand, and that's it. We've seen that with Caicedo, and they would really not buckle on anything less than what they wanted. I think they even got more than what they wanted in the end. So I think absolutely it's likely. I think De Zerbi admitted in his press conference that it's normal for Brighton to sell their top players. What's important is they replace them, and we've seen that time and time again. And I think obviously Ferguson might be difficult to replace. I think he's got that kind of eye for goal that we don't often see. I think strikers like that are hard to come by. So I think out of everyone that's left, he could potentially be the hardest to replace. As we've seen over the years, strikers like that are so few and far between. And at the age he is, it's something incredible, really. And I think the sky is the limit for him. If he can keep developing, keep going at the rate that he's going, he can be anything he wants. I think De Zerbi said himself he could be one of the top scorers in Europe, and I absolutely agree with that. I think he could really get to those levels. I think De Zerbi compared him to Christian Vieri, the Italian legend, obviously scorer. And obviously there's been talk of Alan Shearer as well. You never know. I mean, obviously Haaland's breaking all kind of records at the moment, but who says Ferguson can't hit that in a few years? At 18 years old, it's amazing, really, what he's doing.
Yeah, he looks like a fantastic player, doesn't he? And when we were watching him, I was thinking, in my head, all these scenarios working through, and I thought, he scored, I think, 10 Premier League goals in 24 Premier League games. He hasn't started a majority of those. No. It's quite scary if you put him into Man City's squad or a team like that who are providing that service, he could easily get about 30 goals a season if he stayed fit. And it's scary. And he's such a well-rounded player. Like we spoke about his goals, obviously great reaction time, great positioning for the first goal against Newcastle. Second goal, they kind of stepped back and went, go on then, have a shot. And he just curled it into the bottom corner like he was 3 yards out. He just so effortlessly just bent it round into the corner. Made it look easy from distance. And then for the third goal, he managed to get a shot off when he was quite in a tight position, and it sort of shows his versatility. We've obviously seen he's so powerful in the air, and 18 years old, I was watching him thinking, how am I 24? How am I 6 years? 6 years older than him, and he's probably twice my height, twice my width. He's a monster, isn't he? Yeah,
it's amazing. I think what James Milner pointed out in his interview after the game as well is that he does the ugly side of the game as well. So he isn't just one of those kind of maybe luxury players that's hanging around the box and just waiting to get a tap in as such. He's running and he's putting players under pressure, and he's doing that kind of side of the game that makes life easier for his teammates. And to have that kind of enthusiasm and the effort levels on top of the talent, I think he can really be anything he wants to be. And it's so incredibly exciting. I mean, not just for Brighton, but just for the Premier League, for football, really. I think having a player of his talent, and long may it continue.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited to see how it goes and see how his Premier League and international career goes. And in terms of next year, are there any teams you can see maybe having a look at him, and how much do you think they might want to get him for him? How much do you think Brighton are going to want to sell him for?
I think, well, if Caicedo was going for 120, I think Ferguson will be at least that. I think at least that and more. I think there's been talk of him potentially being 200 million, but we'll see. We'll see how that goes. But I think in terms of clubs that may want him, I think take your pick, really. I think there's so many clubs that are in need of a striker. I think obviously Arsenal could potentially have him. I think he'd be probably perfect for them and can fit into their front line pretty seamlessly. Same with Man United. I think he's a Man United fan growing up, so I think Man United fans are definitely really keen for, if he was to move on, for him to go there, and I think they would snap it up if they had the chance, really, if they had the funds to do so. But I think any team in the Premier League, and we've seen Real Madrid sign Jude Bellingham, you never know, he could potentially go to someone like that, and we've seen how many goals Bellingham scored. I think I wouldn't put that past Ferguson, to be honest. Yeah. So I think not just the Premier League, I think teams all over Europe will be looking to sign Ferguson if the opportunity came. But I really hope that Ferguson stays at Brighton, obviously at least to the end of the season, which I think he will. He's obviously got a contract until 2028, so that was so important for Brighton to tie him down until then and get the most amount of money as possible when the time comes.
Yeah, definitely. I'm hoping he'll stay there for a little while, because I think De Zerbi's a fantastic coach, seems to be a great setup at Brighton, and we've seen players in the past quite young, showing a lot of potential, and they move maybe a bit prematurely or move to not the right setup, and things don't work out for them. And on the topic of young talent, Brighton have signed Ansu Fati from Barcelona. I believe he's the youngest goal scorer in Barcelona's history and the youngest goal scorer in the Spain's national team history. How kind of surreal is it that they've secured his services?
Absolutely crazy, really. I think the night it was announced, it just almost came out of nowhere. You just didn't see it coming. I think we were talking last week about potential players that Brighton might sign to replace Julio Enciso, who's obviously out with a serious injury. But no one in anyone's wildest dreams would expect that Ansu Fati would be the man to do that. And it's difficult to see how he might even start. I mean, that's the crazy thing of it. Brighton are doing so well.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Thank you so much for tuning in to Latest TV News. If you'd like to read more stories from across the county, please make sure to visit Sussex World online.